Uh, Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you being here today. My name is Bob Wazorek. I'm the chief expert at the Training and Consulting Consortium, and pleased to bring with for you today Lance Whitener, who heads up our military and veteran transition training programs, and also another panelist, Melissa Castello, who the two of them have tag teamed on a number of veteran transitioning initiatives that we've trained on. So with that, hand it over to Lance. Take it away, please.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it, and we're excited to be here today. Just by way of background, who I am, my name is Lance Whitener. I've been in the financial services industry for approximately 20 years now. And after I got out of graduate school, decided I was going to follow in my grandfather's footsteps and raise my right hand and join the United States Navy. He's one of the last living World War II Navy veterans, and just he was always my mentor and one of my best friends, and I always admired what he did. So I joined as a Navy Reserve officer, did approximately 3 years with Navy Cargo Handling Battalion 8. After Supply Corps school, so I'm a Supply Corps Reserve officer in the Navy, the business unit of the Navy. Did 3 years in officer recruiting, and now down at SEAL Team 18 in their logistics support unit, and have had just had a great experience. So I have the unique perspective of seeing the world from both the financial services side and now approximately 7 to 8 years on the military side, and seeing a lot of people transition across those lines as reservists put on their uniform and they're in their private sector job. They really have to wear two hats. If they come from active duty, then they really have to make a full sweeping transition. And then in some cases, I saw in my years in the Navy, actually an opportunity to pull folks that were professionals that have been doing this for a number of years and said, I want to put on that uniform. And we were so thrilled to be able to help them with that process. The reason that this unique perspective matters so much is because we've been able to see what has worked and what has not with veterans that are transitioning. Of course, veterans are transitioning in record numbers, really numbers that we haven't seen since World War II. And they're oftentimes looking for career options and opportunities on the back end. And they don't always know what questions to ask. They don't necessarily know always what industry to go in. They look for internships and opportunities to maybe just sit in casually or informally. There are, of course, great partnership opportunities vis-a-vis the Department of Defense. That could be Soldier for Life, it could be American Corporate Partners, things like that. And what we have found in seeing what has worked and what hasn't, just empirically and talking with hundreds of veterans, is that most veterans, because of their mettle, they're able to transition on some level successfully. And we always want to see that transition happen successfully. And unfortunately, in some cases, just as the way life goes, in some cases unsuccessfully. And that becomes a little bit of a tragic note, particularly for our partner firms where we do training that really put a lot of resources into training these veterans, because they want them to have a successful outcome, right? They want to be able to bring the veteran in and give them all the resources to bear so that they ensure that they have a great opportunity to transition successfully. And that really stems what I would call a two-pronged approach to being successful. One is the technical aspect, right? So whether you're going to work as an architect, you decide you want to do that, or you want to go into financial services, or you want to be an engineer, or you want to start your own franchise, or whatever that is. There's a lot of technical catching up to do, if you will, because you're oftentimes competing with people that have already been doing it for a number of years while you were there putting on the uniform. And while most companies appreciate that and they try to be veteran friendly, what we try to do is make sure that you and the company are veteran ready, that you're ready for that transition. And that's very, very important to us. So there's the element of technical training that means that, hey, you've been drinking from a fire hose, right? When you were in the military, you were probably given more information and more training than you cared to remember. And that's important. as you transition, because you want to let that company know that you are prepared to take on as much technical training as required to get you comfortable for that position. There's also another element to this, and it's the one that we want to talk about today because it transcends industries, right? It's not just financial services, it's not just technology, it's not just media, it's not just engineering, it's not any of these things. And that is the element of culture shock. And the reason that there's such an element of culture shock in firms with veteran groups is because it's more pronounced, I would say, with veteran groups and veteran cohorts, simply because you come from an industry, a world, a previous professional background that was very homogenous, right? And that's not to say that the military is not diverse. Of course it is. It's very meritocratic. We have people of all orientations and genders. And the thing that I have always appreciated about the Department of Defense and the United States military, of course, is that it is truly meritocratic. There are no pay differences between men and women or whatever color you are or your orientation. That doesn't matter. The point is if you do your job and you do it well and you have sustained superior performance day in and day out, you will get promoted, right? So in that sense, it is very homogenous. We tend to wear the same uniform. We tend to carry out the mission of the day the same way, even though the tasks themselves are different. So when you move over to the private sector, it can be oftentimes very intimidating, and it creates an element of culture shock. So what we're going to do today is we're going to address some of these elements, figure out how to manage expectations so that when you do see them, you are just simply more prepared for it and you know how to address and overcome those. So I'm going to move into screen share mode at this point. And with me today is Miss Melissa Costello. She comes from the human resources side and has been very instrumental in helping us develop this program. As I said, when we go into private sector firms, it's important for us to encompass all elements of that transition, right? We even bring in some cases, the management team so that they have a sense for what it is that you're doing when they hire you, when they lead you, when they manage you, when they support you. We want them to have a little bit of an understanding about what it means to have walked a mile in the veteran's shoes. So with me today is Miss Melissa Costello. Say hi, Melissa.
Hello, everyone.
And she's going to cover a couple of these slides as she has, again, been very, very instrumental in helping us develop this program. So with that, thank you for being here, and we're going to move right into it. By the way, it's important to note that Mr. Bob Wazorek, who's the proprietor of the Training and Consulting Consortium, has been with us every step of the way as we've developed this program. He has been doing this in training in private sector companies for over 30 years now, and has developed a very successful practice of coming in and getting any sort of cohort trained to that transition. So whether they're coming out of undergrad, grad, they're coming from a different line of work. He has been committed to this industry for 30 years, and that has not changed. He hires, we have dozens of what he calls XP3RT, which are experts. I have been privileged to be dubbed as an expert, which means you come with experience, expertise, and excellence. And that means that you have, just as you have in the military, you are expected to come with sustained superior performance in all elements of technical knowledge, presentation skills, and making sure that you're a good instructor from the pedagogical standpoint. So I'm thrilled to be able to join Bob on this mission as we embark on helping veterans transition.
And one thing to keep in mind too, everyone deals with some sort of culture shock in one way, shape, or form. It's not only the veteran community. Whether you went to, a small university or worked in small firms, and all of a sudden you go to, a company that's publicly owned and global and has, 50,000 employees, that can be just as much a culture shock for an employee as it would be someone coming from the military. So everyone, not just those transitioning, experiences some form of culture shock throughout their career. So please go into this knowing you are certainly not alone in some of the emotions that you might be feeling today, tomorrow, or down the road.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Melissa. I've already touched on my background, 20 years in financial services, and then about 7 years in the Navy, and then Melissa, of course, who has just a tremendous swath of experience in the human resources side. We want to go right into the elements of culture shock because that's why we're here today, and we don't want to delay this any further. So what we have identified as these elements are, number one, simply just leaving the military, right? When you leave the military, you're going to find yourself in a very, very different world, a very different environment. Some people tackle this very well, not everybody does. Once you leave the military, you also have to find the right fit on the back end. So leaving the military is one element, but finding the right fit, of course, is another one. Once you've found that right fit, how do you adapt to your new environment? How do you build alliances to support you along your way on your journey? The importance of seeking a mentor. Melissa's going to discuss that from the human resources side, and then also when to ask for help, because at some point we want to make sure that before you throw in the towel and say this is not for me, you always at the very end, when things are just that bleak, you always ask for help before you ultimately punch out, because you've got to give the company an opportunity to support you. So there are natural questions that you're going to ask, right? The first thing that happens when you leave the military is and I see Mr. Daryl Stephen on today. We've known each other for many years, and we've talked about this one-on-one. He was we had the pleasure of working him, just a true patriot, Army Ranger. It's nice to have you on, Daryl. We talk about the questions that are asked naturally when you leave the military, and that is, it was very structured. Everybody kind of looked the same. They had the same uniform. The paycheck was guaranteed. I was given a housing allowance. I was given a set of orders on the plan of the day. We knew how to carry out that mission. The camaraderie was real because we had one common goal. And the career objective was very clear. And that was when you raised your right hand on day one of joining the military. And you were there to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Your mission was very clear, even if your role was very different. So you come with a very different set, an often more ambiguous set of parameters about how to carry out your job. So the first thing that's going to happen when you join, not in all cases, that we're not trying to throw up warning flags here, but we just want to make sure that you're aware of it, that when you start in a new company, it's very natural to start asking these questions. Should I have really left? Was it a good fit? In most cases, go with your gut. Probably if you left, there was a reason for it. You wanted to settle down a little bit. You wanted to be able to focus on your family, and we understand that, but it is natural to have those questions. Now, the second part of that is, okay, fine. You've resolved yourself to the fact that you have left the military. We got it. Now you have to figure out if this job was the right fit, okay? And that's not as easy as it may seem. There are a lot of programs out there, such as American Corporate Partners that we discuss, Soldier for Life. Again, you have to go with your gut a little bit, but sometimes you don't know what you do or don't know until you know it, and that can be very dizzying, if you will. So you don't want to be misguided, right? What you think you want now and what you really want could be very different. We have heard people say some relatively outlandish things, right? I want to work on Wall Street because I want to make a lot of money. Well, guess what? There are people that, of course, have been very successful working in the financial services industry, or the architecture industry, or veterinarian, or medicine, or they've become actors maybe in Hollywood, whatever it is. But there are also some preconceived biases that you want to make sure that you overcome. Not everybody that works in any one of those industries is necessarily going to become wildly successful. Oftentimes, it's just a career change. We have heard people say, I want to work in the technology industry because it seems laid back. People wear loafers and it might be a nice change of pace. Well, guess what? You might be given 10,000 shares of stock, but now you're asked to, even if you are in those loafers, you're asked to work a lot of late nights because you're trying to get this technology. It's a disruptive technology. You're trying to move it forward, and there's a lot of pressure on your ability to be innovative, and stay ahead of your competitive peers. Hey, people have said, I want to become an entrepreneur because I'm tired of having a boss. In the military, you always have a senior ranking officer that you're or enlisted that you're reporting up to. Guess what? Newsflash here. If you're an entrepreneur, you still have a boss, and that boss is your client, right? And so whether you're a partner or you're working for clients or whatever, you're always going to have a boss. So don't think that just because you're an entrepreneur means that you've gotten out of boss mode. You're always going to have to report to somebody. Even the president of the United States, in most cases, reports to a boss. So it's important to understand that depending on what element you're pursuing, there are always pros and cons. There are always trade-offs to what you're thinking about. I want a corporate job because I want to be home every day. But what if you get in consulting and every morning Monday morning there's a car waiting to take you to the airport? You're not back until Friday evening. Or you get into medicine and you're doing a rotational, right, at a hospital, or you're in investment banking and the expectation is that you're working every day. Just because you have a corporate job doesn't necessarily mean that all corporate jobs, of course, are created equal. So you have to understand that, yes, you've moved away from the military, you've committed to it, but we don't want you to kind of, jump out of the fire and into the frying pan, as they say. We want to make sure that you have been able to manage those expectations, and that you understand what you're getting yourself into, because that will only exacerbate whatever culture shock you're already dealing with. Make sure that you ask the right questions, that you study, and of course, get a mentor and ask all the questions that you need to be comfortable with your next transition. And it does add to culture shock if you don't do it the right way. Now, you found a job, you went in there, you took the interview, you got offered the job, congratulations, right? You are now in a new team, in a new environment, in a new firm, and we wish you all the best. The question is, how do you adapt to your new environment? As a veteran, of course, the expectation is that you're always adaptable, right? In the Navy, they say semper gumby, right? Always flexible. The corporate environment, on the other hand, is very foreign in most cases. Even though the nomenclature and the acronyms and the usage of some of the shorthand is very different across various branches of the military, the reality is it just kind of sounds the same to a foreign ear. In corporate environment, it is very different. Not only are the words different, the vocabulary is different, but how it's delivered and received is very different. That's one element. So the language is just going to be very foreign to what you've experienced over the last however many years you were in, whether you did your minimum kind of 3 to 4 years, or you decided to stay till full retirement and beyond. The language is just very different from the military to the private sector. You oftentimes deal with the fact that people are going to be younger than you. Remember, you've got to give yourself a little bit of a break here. You were in uniform. You were doing something that was different. You were doing something that was of course time honored and selfless, and we appreciate that. But the reality is that the private sector moved on, and when you chose to sign up for service, you may have had peers that went to your school or that you grew up with in your hometown that took a job, and they've been honing that craft for the past decade while you were doing the yeoman's work in the military. And the reality is you may now be reporting to somebody that is younger than you, that has more experience than you do, that may be making more money than you do, and that can be intimidating. And so you have to be just very aware that when you transition, you're going to deal with things like this. Asking questions, right? In the military, that's sometimes not only encouraged but required. But in some cases, depending on who your commanding officer is and who your chain of command is, your leading enlisted officer, your senior enlisted folks, they may often not like that. They expectation is that they'll ask you the questions and you be ready to report. Well, in the private sector, the expectation is that you're going to do so. You're going to ask questions, and that's not a bad thing. You're part of a team environment, and just because somebody's senior ranking to you doesn't necessarily mean that there are any problems, right? Who can you lean on to get you through these periods of uncertainty? Should you talk to your manager when you're not comfortable? Do you have peers that you want to seek out? Do you go to HR? Does that create problems? So I encourage you to really think through those and seek out people with similar experiences. Is that perceived weakness? No, not necessarily, not generally in the private sector. Okay. So far, do we have any Q&A? Do we have anybody that would like to chip in or have any questions before we move on? And by the way, we're going to have a few minutes to have open question, open forum to discuss all of these. This is a relatively fast session today. We're just touching on the wave tops here. We're not gonna do any of the real granular stuff that we might do if we're working for a company. Happy to answer any questions as you may have them, but of course we are going to leave some time at the end to carry on. As I said, this is a relatively quick presentation today, just to give you the 30,000 foot view.
One thing I think it's important to keep in mind is that being frustrated is normal. Permit yourself to be frustrated because you are adapting to a new environment. One of my favorite quotes is improvise, adapt, overcome. For those of you who don't know who said that, it is a Clint Eastwood quote. And I think it's no different when you're in a new corporate environment. Even if you're a civilian going from one industry to another, there's going to be different nomenclature. There's going to be different cultural norms. And I think it's just recognizing that differences are okay and allowing yourself to take the time to get acclimated. No one expects you to do so in a week, a day, or a month. But keep in mind, to all of Lance's points, it's going to be different. Military is much more regimented and much more, in some ways, organized than the private sector, and there's a lot more gray. And the gray is probably what makes the most difference here. You could be working on a team and your person next to you might get a 6% raise and you might get a 3% raise. It's not like the military where everything is, well, you did X, so you get Y. It's a lot more interpretation by the company, by the managers. We use the word discretion for a reason. And just something to keep in mind. Allow yourself to be frustrated, and certainly if you think you're being treated unjustly or unfairly, then do take appropriate action and use the different channels of communication.
Excellent point. Let's take a quick moment here. So, Mr. Tang, would age be a negative factor in the hiring process? I hope to break into capital markets and investment banking, and I am primarily targeting first analyst position when most of the candidates are fresh out of college. I'll touch on it a little bit, and actually we have Bob Wazorek, who has done a ton of training for these analyst programs, is your best resource to answer that question. The answer from my perspective, from the veteran perspective, is it depends. If they have a veteran hiring cohort that is specific to helping you move into that position, whether it's capital markets or investment banking or whatever it is, then the expectation has already been set. They have a program built specifically for transitioning veterans to fast track you into that role. And the more that you can align yourself with a group or a manager or a hiring platform that is prepared to undertake you as a new hire, the better chances of your success in that role. On the other hand, if you decide to transition on your own and you have applied separately, I think the best person to answer that is Bob, if he will allow.
Sure, 100%. Thanks, Lance. So it's a great question, and I've dealt with transitioning military members as they were going through training programs at different financial services firms. And I sort of recall one in particular that really touched me, and hopefully I had an impact on him. Was a Marine officer that was transitioning into just what you're suggesting here, into the capital markets side of the business. And it was in one of those first year analyst positions. And so that was, sort of in that cohort and getting the training that the other analysts were getting. The challenge that this Marine had was that they were sort of behind from a technical standpoint. So like many Marines, this person was super diligent. He would do his homework, do the online learning, the e-learning that we had to supplement the class, and then would come in an hour before class and meet with me to sort of ask his questions and sort of clarify any misconceptions he might have had. And that was fine. That was able to accelerate him up the learning curve so that he was on par, or if not excelling beyond his peers that were also participating in the program. But what I found that he was struggling with most was not the technical elements, where we can teach you that, we can upskill you on that. That's not a problem. where I think he was struggling, and it took some coaching and getting his mental mind frame in the right frame of mind, is that while everyone was in the same role, they were the same class of 20 whatever, and we're going through this program together. The personal side of this was that he was a number of years older. He was married and he had young children, a young family. And so where everyone else in his class is like, hey, let's go out and get some beers after class. And he's like, well, I got to go home. I got to do this. I got to leave my wife. I have, excuse me, sorry about that. Of course, when I'm on mic, the phone rings. So that was sort of his struggle, was sort of getting in the frame of mind that, where at a certain level he was more mature and more experienced, but on another level lacked some technical skills that, frankly, that's what we were doing. That's why I was in the training program. We're fixing that. But then he had to sort of mentally sort of prepare himself that he's going to be in this role, and it is a meritocracy, so that he will have the ability to get promoted and excel out of the role, but needs to sort of suck it up and go through this entry-level position. It's a great entry-level position to be a first-year analyst. But even though he was several years older and had, from a personal standpoint, was at a different stage in life than his peers in the program, he just had to mentally adjust and sort of hunker down and just acknowledge it's only one beer for me, and I'm going home, opposed to the rest of the crew that was happy to stay out all night. So anyway, that was sort of some of my experience. So the issue was not age going into the role, but it was the sort of mental mindset of, well, I'm more senior, I'm more advanced than my peers here. Well, that's sort of got to just adjust that mental mindset as you're going through that same training and initiation together. So Suzanne, hopefully that gives you some insight to some of my experiences that I've seen with service members going through this transition. So the job will be right and adjust for you. It's just, you just need to just tweak your mindset and expectations as you're going through the transition yourself.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. And Zijan, hope that answers your question. There you go. Thank you so much, Bob. So what to expect, right? Every experience, of course, is very different. Some people have fallen right in with their roles, and some people really struggle. And this is where it becomes very frustrating for companies. The reasons are absolutely vast. Some people just have different experiences. They have different maturity levels. They may have become part of a cohort, or they may have maybe they got out of the military and used their GI Bill to pay for graduate school, and so they've had a couple of years to just culturally adapt. But it is the case that every experience is different. So I think it's important, if you walk away with nothing else today, it's important to remember that again, we're not raising alarm bells or trying to create problems for you. We just want to make sure that you have some awareness of culture shock, so that if it does in fact happen, you are better prepared to deal with it. Feelings can range from something very almost kind of sort of euphorial. I should have been doing this all along. I found my home. I love this. I can't imagine doing something else. Gosh, wow, what a great team, what a great environment, to just feeling very isolated and very alone. And that is where we start having attrition issues, because it becomes an unfortunate use of your time, of your experience. The company gets frustrated because, of course, they have invested their time and efforts, and so we try to discourage that, although it does in fact happen. So if you have the I should have been doing this all along feeling, then we're just so happy for you. If you have feelings that fall on the other end of that spectrum, then of course that's when you start reaching out to some of these resources that we're going to talk about momentarily. Remember, it is the case that you felt this way on the first day of boot camp. Almost everybody shows up literally shaking in their boots, right? You were scared at the time. You didn't have a choice. The difference is at that time you just sucked it up and you got through it. You're more mature now. You probably have the wherewithal, and even though you're not necessarily signed into a commitment, although in some cases you may sign a contract, the reality is that with the right time, with the right support, with the right experiences, you're going to get through a lot of these negative feelings, and you may not even have them at all. But time often corrects that. Okay, oftentimes your closest allies are those that you share your experiences with, right? So that's a great question. Thank you, Dave. We're going to address that here at the very end, talking about questions that you might ask your employer. Your closest allies are your veterans. That could be anything ranging from a formal veteran group at your firm. In some cases they have those, in some cases they don't. Generally, anybody that you have some affinity with, somebody that has your ability to share that background and gain clarity is very important. There are rarely instances that we found, particularly in military service, where people are not willing to step across corporate lines, right? This happens, fortunately, more often with the veteran population than maybe some other areas, because you have such a foundation together, because everybody understands putting on that uniform, right? So whether you're working for a competitive firm or a neutral firm, oftentimes people, if you find somebody that you really think can share some information and ideas with you and just make sure that you're feeling comfortable, we have found as a team here, Bob and Melissa and I have found that people are willing to step across whatever name is on that door. When it comes to supporting veterans, they often are very, very willing to give you their time and effort to really dedicate themselves to making sure that you have the best experience. Stay in contact with people from your former life. Just because you're in your new life doesn't mean you have to cut that completely off. Remember, those were, whether you believed it or not at the time, those probably more in retrospect were more fun than they were in the moment, but those were the good old days. And staying in contact with people can really give you a sense of comfort, right? You can kind of commiserate, particularly if you got out together. You can say, hey, here's what's working for me, here's what's not. So it's important to just keep that base of what was comfortable. The other thing is, and finally, I encourage people a lot of times, you can go back in. Remember, there's USERRA and a lot of protective measures, and whether you're legally protected or not, most firms are going to support you if you decide you want to go back into the reserves, right? You're 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Most corporations love having service members in their company, and it's an important way, and I think it's a good way, quite frankly, for you to keep one toe in a very familiar life. So consider going back in. You can keep working toward your pension if you care to do so. You can keep taking advantage of some of those privileges that you get as a service member, whether it's the USO or privileged boarding on planes or all those other perks. It's important to kind of keep that old life. So the more you can do, the point of all of this is the more that you can do to kind of align yourself with your old life, the more you're going to always be able to kind of dabble back into what was comfortable for you, and that allows you to adapt. Okay, I'm going to turn this slide over to Melissa briefly, because she has worked with a lot of veterans that have transitioned to the private sector, and she's helped them get comfortable, in some cases very, very quickly, and she's going to talk about the importance of finding a mentor.
Thank you, Lance. And again, thank you all for your time and attention today, and moreover for your service to our country. I'm a big believer in finding a mentor. Now, some companies have official programs, true mentorship programs, others don't. Just because a company may or may not have an official program doesn't mean you can't seek out a mentor. A mentor can help you navigate not only the company itself, but your role in it. They can help you talk about career options and thus your own career trajectory. They can even maybe guide you with the ins and outs of people on your team, or perhaps other teams that you might be working with or who could be supporting you. Mentors really offer a vast amount of information and resources. I've worked in firms that have had official programs and ones that were unofficial, and either I looked to someone who I emulated or who, I really aspire to, and then tried to emulate what they did, or flat out asked them, hey, you know what, I would love for, to pick your brain and to have you kind of serve as a guide or a mentor. Most people, more often than not, are happily accepting of those sorts of additional roles, because it's also flattering for them that someone sees in them, this quality that they'd like to take on for themselves one day. Mentors can also help you increase your own self-awareness of what you're good at, maybe what you think you're good at, or where your skills and interests might best be utilized, not only in your current role, but perhaps in another role within the company or another role even outside of the company. The best mentors are going to be the ones who are going to help you grow and blossom and not, keep you pigeonholed in the company or the position that you're in. However, if they are within your company, they might be able to expose you to projects or teams or initiatives that might be of interest and aligned with the path that you want to take. And even if they maybe can't necessarily put you onto a team, they might be able to make an introduction or maybe catch up with you on some of the initiatives that are going on. You might not have direct involvement in some of those projects, but certainly they might be able to help share some of that information with you. Mentors are also wonderful in giving you insight into corporate culture. And it's important to note, and this is where I have no experience, so maybe Lance can fill in for me for a moment. In most companies, not only is there a corporate culture, but each team and department might have their own subculture. And it's important to recognize, yes, we're all one firm, but even when Lance and I worked together, different departments had very different feels. The culture on the trading room floor was very different than the culture on the investment banking floor, which was very different from that on the research floor. So yes, we might all have similar qualities and characteristics being part of one firm, but each department has their own subculture. I don't know if that's true in the military, but it's certainly something to be mindful of, and a mentor can help you guide both the company's culture and the subculture. And lastly, find someone. You might have asked for a mentor, or be it directly and indirectly, and the person might not be the right fit for you, and that's okay, because the person that is mentoring you should really help you build not only your skill set, but your confidence. If they're not helping to elevate you in a variety of levels, then seek out someone who will, because a mentor at the end of the day should be someone who wants to see you succeed and therefore has helped you building your presence and your confidence.
Absolutely.
Both today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Melissa. If they are available, not every corporation has, quite frankly, a veteran population. Remember, it's 1% or less of the population. On the other hand, don't despair if it's not the case. There's always somebody that's going to be willing to help you navigate those bumps in the road. However, if you can find a veteran mentor, that might even be as good or better. They'll be able to understand some of the challenges that you're facing very specifically. And remember, a veteran mentor or a mentor in general is going to give you a perspective that your direct manager is not going to have. The direct manager, that relationship is always going to be a little bit different because you report to them. There are productivity expectations. There are expectations from you to them on how they should communicate with you and give you feedback if things are going both well and not well. So a mentor is going to have that separation that gives you just more opportunity to ask very frank questions. So somebody that's a veteran will better understand your specific circumstances and sense of professional unease, and kind of give you more hand-holding opportunities through all of those elements of culture shock that we've discussed. And they're also going to probably, because they themselves have had previous experience and probably went through and researched what programs are available. Some of these companies can be very, very big. You can find resources available to you, both internally and externally, and veteran mentors may have very specific knowledge about how to support you in that way. Now, I'm going to turn it back over for this very last slide, and that is to Melissa, because Melissa, again, having an HR background, has seen this happen too many times, and that is, when do you ask for help? I want you to think about it when all else seems to be lost, and you're thinking about sending in that resignation. That's when you need to kind of throw this lifeline to yourself. And I'm going to have Melissa discuss this.
So when to ask for help is really based on the individual and the point that you're at, both mentally, professionally, and emotionally. As soon as you think you've made the wrong decision, that's when you should be asking for help. Having a bad day does not equate changing, pivoting your entire, career trajectory. And that's okay. We've all questioned some of the decisions that we've made. But if you're finding that you're increasingly unhappy, you're anxious about going into work, you have that sense of dread, then that is the warning sign that yes, you should seek help and try to get it fast. If you have a mentor, absolutely, they should be one of the first people that you seek out to ask for their guidance, and maybe they can help you navigate, this road that you're on. If you have an HR person that's knowledgeable, and I say knowledgeable because a small firm might not necessarily even have an HR department, but if there is an HR presence, go to them as well. Say, listen, I'm unhappy. What are my options? Maybe you just need a sounding board. It could be something, it could be a confluence of factors. Maybe seeking some sort of emotional or mental health might be a way to go. There are so many different options, and I know people are always leery of saying, well, I need, maybe I need to talk to someone, be it a counselor or a therapist. Those are wonderful resources. And I think the stigma attached to any sort of mental health has now really come to light, and most people know that this is something that they need to do. So seek help from a variety of places, both trained counselors, an HR department, a mentor. There are a lot of resources that you can avail yourself of. Again, to what Lance and I have been talking about, feeling uncomfortable is a part of the process. Feeling frustrated is certainly part of the process. Don't give up for those reasons. But also, you don't want to be stuck in a situation that you hate. So it's just learning the fine line between getting acclimated, knowing that there's going to be a learning curve. But at the same token, if you're dreading going into work every day and getting feelings of anxiety, that's absolutely when you should reach out and try to get some help. And only you know what approach to take. Maybe the first sounding board you go to is your partner or your spouse or your family. Maybe for some of you, you'd rather go directly to a mentor because you don't want the family influence. You want someone who's going to be more objective. And maybe you say, you know what? I might just want to talk to a counselor because it could be a combination of, sense of loss from that team camaraderie in the military, sense of uneasiness from trying something new. It could be other factors going on. Maybe you just got married or had a child or bought a house. And it could be all these things combined that could be causing you to have a feeling of distress. So knowing when to ask for help will only benefit you, but when that time is right and who to go for, because it's really a matter of personal style and situation.
Thank you, Melissa. That concludes our formal presentation. We wanted to hit the highlights. We wanted to be respectful of your time, of course, because we understand that everybody has a busy calendar and may want to get to lunch. We do want to open it up. We are going to be available here for the next few minutes to take some of your questions. We had one come through from Dave Blyde. What question should I ask a prospective employer? I think this is really important. So you don't want to get caught off guard when you sit there across the table from your interviewer and they ask if you have any questions, and Melissa will tell you from an HR perspective, that's the death knell if you say no. You just never say no. You want to come, because at very best, it looks like maybe you didn't come as prepared as you should have, and at very worst, it looks like you just don't care, and that is not the way to do it. Remember, in a professional environment, it's important to come ready to have that interactive dialogue. So Dave, thank you for the question. What questions should you ask yourself? Well, at the very least, particularly as a veteran, I would ask them point blank, what resources do you have available to me as a veteran hire, right? You want to make sure that, again, the employer is not just veteran friendly, which is nice. I think most companies would kind of acknowledge that having a veteran is a nice thing, but being veteran ready, right? What resources do they have? Do they have a training program for you? That's something that we do with a lot of our partner firms. We want to make sure that that we go out and support their hiring efforts with a boot camp or in some cases ongoing training. Do they have a veteran network? Do they have veteran mentors available for you? Do they have resources that are online that you can go to if there are any issues? So when you sit down, I think it's a natural question for you to ask them, and they're going to appreciate that you did. And they probably will be even presumptuous that you're going to ask that question and come prepared. And if they're not, that's perfectly fine. It's a specific question. They'll be happy to get back with you. So I think as a veteran, it's probably very important, particularly if you're sitting on here thinking that culture shock is an issue. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So thank you for the question, Dave.
A couple of other ones that you might want to ask are, because their companies might not have a veteran program, and don't be off put by that either. But you could certainly ask, what sort of training programs do you offer? What sort of not only new hire training, but ongoing trainings do you offer? You could ask the company about what are the opportunities for any sort of rotational programs, for promotions. Ask if there is a mentorship program. There are lots of things that you can ask to show that you are prepared and that you are eager to work and that you want to make a difference. If the company updates press releases on their website, maybe take something from there as well. There are lots of different ways to show that you're prepared, and it also depends on who you're sitting with. If you're asking, HR, well, what's it like to be an investment banker? I would probably save that question for the actual banker. Just like you might want to ask a question, well, what are your benefits, to the HR professional? So also ask the appropriate questions of the appropriate individuals. And show do your research. Look on the company website, look on their LinkedIn page, see if they've got an Instagram page. Maybe, ask about corporate volunteerism or different programs that they have. There are so many different things you can ask that show you were prepared. Even if you have 5 diverse questions, that shows you did your homework.
Thank you, Melissa. We have 12 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Steven, so good to see you on. We go back a long way, so I'm very happy to have you here. Okay. Okay, Zijin. I am currently working on the veterans program at some of the big banks on the street. In the meantime, I also hope to gain some hands-on experience through an internship while I am on terminal leave. I notice most banks are targeting students in their senior or junior year for the internship. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes, we'll see, would there be any advice on how to get an internship? Well, it goes back to our formal conversation, which is, are you getting the internship through a veteran program? If so, then I think it only stands to reason that having somebody that has that type of background that you have to get you into that internship program. There are a lot of internship programs for some of these more kind of high-paced roles. But I think, again, I would probably turn it back over to Bob just on generally what advice on how to get an internship. I think he's going to come from a very general standpoint on how best to secure one of those, because he's done a good job and been so successful at getting people those types of internships.
Okay, thanks, Lance. Yeah, so I think that's right. You do want to get the internships. That is, I think, the correct path and approach to go after. The internships, the way you want to think about them, are basically a long-term dress rehearsal or long-term interview where the firms generally hire out of the intern programs. So long as you do reasonably well as an intern, you're highly likely to get a permanent offer. So that is definitely the path. Now, you mentioned the juniors or seniors. So for the internship, it's actually a little bit earlier. So I would say sophomores and juniors, not seniors. And so what's happened in sort of, I use the term generically, Wall Street, is that the hiring process has gotten earlier and earlier. So that internships are really targeting sophomores and then into junior years. By the senior year, you're now looking for a permanent position. So you do want to sort of start the process sooner rather than later. I think we certainly are in touch with a number of banks that are recruiting veterans and are interested in accessing that pool of talent. So Ziyang, you can sort of reach out to us offline, and and happy to connect you with a couple people that would be veteran friendly and veteran ready to see if there's a fit between those organizations and yourself. So I think be happy to connect those dots for you offline. So just reach out to us after the webinar. We can arrange that.
Yeah, and Zijin, I saw that Diego Rubio referred you to our webinar. We've known Diego for a number of years, and he's been a big supporter of veterans transitioning. And I'm happy to Bob and Melissa and I are happy to be a resource for you specifically as you go down this path to try to get this internship. Okay, any other questions? Okay. It looks like not. So we had budgeted